Hello, my name is Malik Harrington, and welcome to another episode of the Family Budget Fisherman. Have a great show to share with you today. But before we get into the show, if you could take the time to subscribe, like, and comment on this particular show, and even share it with some people that may find it as much of a value for their fishing excursions, their fishing opportunities as yours and mine is, I'd really appreciate it. My interest is to grow the channel to be something of a resource for all persons who choose to fish, particularly those who fish with spinning gear. You can get into fishing with spinning equipment and covering water, and you can cover water as quickly as you can with bait casting equipment. I oftentimes fish with people who use bait casting equipment, power fishermen, and I have to use a lot of my power finesse techniques in addition to the power fishing that I already am used to doing. So, for example, most of you have thrown, or maybe many of you, I should say, have thrown a spinnerbait. Okay, this is your average. Now, this is on the smaller side. This is a 1/4 ounce spinnerbait here. And then, of course, there's a 3-ounce chatterbait here. And then, of course, there's your top. This is your submersible frog, and I got some floaties as well. And then we have your top water baits here. Then, of course, your lipless crankbaits, your square bills, and your jerk baits. This is a little smaller than what's typical, but it's your jerk bait. Now, and then of course, you've got your jigs. Power fishermen love these big jigs. Here's another example of a jig. Underspin. Okay. Flukes. When you're power fishing, particularly if you're bass fishing, that's pretty much what you would use when you're power fishing. I have a lot more bait on this table, however. Now, I will say, you can also power finesse with great competence and speed by using some of the techniques that I'm going to share with you today. So, for example, most of us would throw a curly tail. You would throw it on a typical ball head jig, and you would throw it, cast it out, and reel it in slow. This is a 1/8 ounce Ned head jig. I guess you could say Ned head jig. And I put the 3-inch curly tail on it. I can catch all species of bass, plus the striped bass, plus the crappie, and even some red ear. And I fish this fairly quickly, letting it fall quickly, hit the ground, just like you would a Ned rig, and then pop it up and do the same thing. I assume that there are people who do fish this. I don't know of anybody. Most of us have gotten into the Ned rig craze, and that's what we throw. But this is also a fish catcher, and it expands our fishing from just simply going for bass, but for also going for other species. This is also more attractive than the Ned rig, the worm rather, to trout and to salmon as well. So just think of all the techniques you can do for expanding that. Okay? Swim baits. Everybody likes to throw big swim bait. Even I, from time to time, think those big old swim baits work out pretty good. But here you go. This is a 2.5 inch swim bait. Here's a 2-inch swim bait. Both of them can go after multiple species of fish and cover water very quickly. And I'll show you actually even some of my spinning gear one more time so that you can become more acquainted with how you can fish very quickly. Here is a tube jig. Now this is a little smaller than most tube jigs that are used particularly for bass fishing. This is a 2.5-inch tube jig, and just to show you in terms of size, roughly the same size. This has a 1/8 ounce jig head in it. This is a 1/16 ounce with a long shank, as you can see. Okay. Then we have another 1/8 ounce. As you can see, this is a 3-inch. And as you can see, the 3-inch is a little bit longer. You can see it's a little bit longer, right? A little bit longer. A little bit longer there. And the purpose of that is to do different types of presentations. And remember, a 3-inch jig with a skirt presentation like that can catch some of the biggest, scariest crappie you can find in the water. There's no doubt about it. Here are a couple of examples of smaller spinnerbait. Both of these are 1/8 ounce each. Now, on the looks of it, it's like, well, what would you be going for this? Obviously, crappie. But I have caught my share of 22 to 25-inch, 3 to 3.5 pound striped bass with these, which is one of the reasons why I continually insist, if you're going to take fishing for multi-species very seriously, that your equipment accommodate that wider range of fish instead of just having light tackle and heavy tackle. I personally believe that a lot of the bass fishermen who use spinning gear use too light of gear in order to go after fish. I think they use a lot lighter gear than they have to use. So, for example, if you're throwing fluorocarbon, you don't have to worry about fluorocarbon being seen underwater by the sharpest eye of a fish until you're at about 30-pound test diameter. And that's under very specific circumstances that a fish would even notice it. But with all of even in the clearest of water, there's still going to be a lot of refraction in the water where it might see the line, but it won't see the line as part of the bait. But when you hear people using 6-pound tests and 4-pound tests, drop shotting for these big smallmouth and so forth, it makes my heart pump. I just wonder, how can you do it? But many of them do it. More power to you. It's just not something that I have the courage to do. So obviously, you've seen these style of hooks. And obviously you can go after some of the bigger species. I have on occasion caught even crappie on those. Here's something that I've caught more crappie on. This is a shorter one, of course. Here's your average 6-inch, and this right here is about a 4 or 4.5 inch right here. What I like about these, here's another comparison there. If you notice how this barely turns when you're in the water, this is pretty much how it turns in the water, like this. And then it falls real straight. And that has its advantages. Versus, if you notice, see the drop here? And when it's in the water, obviously, it kind of whips out and whips out like that. I like that for certain other time period presentations. But you can catch multiple species with that. Here's another one. This looks like a bat, but it's a crawdad style bait. And I tell you, it's really good. It's only 3 inches. Just as a comparison, this is also 3 inches. And you'll find, well, actually, no, this is 2 3/4 inches. 2 3/4 inches. I apologize for that. It's 2 3/4 inches. And then because this is a 3 inch, you will find that my You'll hear me talk about 3-inch baits a lot. And the main reason why is because 3-inch, when you get too far beyond 3-inch, you're really losing the multi-species technique, and you get into more specific types of fish. If you get too small, you begin to restrict yourself as well. Now, obviously, big fish will eat smaller fish, but smaller fish tend not to eat bigger baits as much. But it is harder to attract a big fish with a small bait than a more moderate or larger size bait. So we know this. Now, having said that, when I'm covering water, I'm using these as well. And I'm gonna give you an example. So say I have on one pole, I have this tube, this jig rigged up, and I'm flipping and pitching. Now I'm flipping and pitching with this, but I'm looking for a particular species of fish. Then I decide, well, you know what? There may be some crappie in there, or some big bluegill, or some big red ear in there. So I'm going to pitch and flip the same water with this right here. And I'm going to catch the fish that were not biting this, but were willing to bite this. Or they were willing to even be a little bit more aggressive and bite this. Or even this curly tail. I haven't brought this up yet, but even this right here. It just depends. This right here is a 2-inch Berkeley curly tail with 1/8 ounce weight on it. So you have these different options, and obviously here's my crappie bait. If I know that I'm in a school of crappie or I'm right up on top of them, I'm going there. I'm going all the way there. You know, same goes for this style here. This creature bait. This is an actual creature bait, which is pretty impressive, is it not? It's a creature bait. And I have some that are like that. I have some sweet beaver size, small sweet beavers as well. But these right here are very attractive, especially in waters where you want a bigger profile than, say, this right here, but not so big that you have to move up to something like this. And this happens to work, and the appendages, they're just reckless. So I would recommend you to any of those. Pick those up at Bass Pro Shops. So I cover water just like, you know, any person with any other. I'm moving fast, pitching, flipping, casting, bringing it back. And just so that you know, I don't pass my rod to myself when I'm casting. I'm a left-handed fish. I'm left-handed, but I fish as a right-handed person because my dad raised me to fish and he was right-handed. But I do cast with my right, and then I start reeling with my left hand, like so. Reel it up, cast, reel it back. When I'm pitching and flipping is a little bit differently because I'm bringing the line out on this side, and I have a preference to do that because I don't want my line to get hooked up on my reel handle. So I'll pull it up on the opposite, and I'll flip and pitch this way, flip and pitch that way. And I have a way of flipping and pitching that's pretty fast. And so one of the reasons why this technique works so well, I'm just going to pick one of these. This one right here is closest. So this is one of my Defy Series rods, and this is the medium fast. And so this fishing line here is 6-pound test diameter, but the break strength rating is 45-pound test. It actually breaks at 61 pounds, but it's rated at 45-pound test because it assumes that you're going to lose some strength depending on the type of knot that you tie. And if you're looking for a particular bite, unless you're in gin clear water, this line I find works out very well where I don't need a trailer. Where I don't need a leader. Now I tie on fluorocarbon leaders just out of habit. As a matter of fact, I got one sitting right here. That one's actually set up for crappie. Here's another one right here. This is a drop shot setup right here. Sometimes they're specific, sometimes they're general. But having said that, you can fish with this particular line, and because it's 6-pound test in terms of diameter, you can cast it like it's 6-pound test. So it won't have a problem throwing this or this. It just does not have that problem that other devices have. Now, this rod, of course, is not as sensitive as other rods might be when it comes to fishing very slow. But I'm a two-handed fisherman. So I'll give you an example. I fish like this. When I'm slow fishing, I actually fish like this. So I don't depend on the rod as much for sensitivity as I do my own fingers. And I flip this way. If you watch my introduction film, you'll find something that I said on that film, on that video. I said, the best fishing equipment that you have, and I may restate this time and again, are your eyes, your ears, your smell, and your hands. That's your best fishing equipment. If you don't master how to fish using those 4 senses, you don't need the 5th one because you shouldn't be tasting anything in the outdoors. If you haven't mastered how to smell, to see, to hear, and to touch, it doesn't matter what kind of fishing equipment you have in your hand. You're not going to be as good with that equipment if you do not master how to fish using your four of the 5 senses that you have. So having said that, I'm a two-handed fisherman, so it works in my benefit to feel the line directly as opposed to feel it on a pole, which means I don't need as sensitive a rod. Now I have some extremely sensitive rods over here, but I don't need that rod sensitivity because I have my fingers literally touching the line. And then some will ask, well, wait a minute, you got that slack line, what if you get a bite? Well, I can get a bite, pull up, but because my rods are 7 feet, if I let go, I'm already pulling up and it's gonna take in that slack line. And then another good thing is most of my reels, I reel in about 30 to 40 inches. This right here reels in 35 inches even with every one turn. I don't have a foot and a half. I mean, I don't have a yard and a half of line sitting out there. It's more like maybe 18 to 24 inches. So I can reel it in with one turn, and with a 7-foot line, a 7-foot rod, I can adjust for that. So you need to make sure that your equipment is accommodating for that kind so that you can keep up in those times of fishing. So that also reduces the size of your overall budget so that you are not having to spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars for super sensitive equipment when you can just hang on to the line with your hand. It's a technique. It's a technique that's employed in order to ensure that you have the best sensitivity. No rod is going to be more sensitive than your fingers. And I promise you, if your rod is more sensitive than your fingers, you have already lost the tournament. I just got to tell you. And you have already, you're already in a situation where you're not going to catch as many fish as you might be interested in catching. So with that said, that is an overall of the type of lures that I use, a little bit of the technique that I employ in terms of covering water with spinning gear, which happens to be on the lower end, the more budget-friendly side of the fishing equipment industry. And last but not least, please don't break your family money. Get out there and try to break your family back. Have a good one.